Welcome back, beautiful tri-state area. Welcome back to a moment of Zen on iHeartRadio 710 WOR, the voice of New York, where we cover the latest in wellness, culture, and trending topics with top experts. I'm your host, Zen Sams. In the Hydration with Heart segment brought to you by Once Upon a Coconut, today we're diving into a subject that affects millions of families across the country, food allergies. With over 33 million Americans facing serious food allergies, prevention is key, especially when it comes to our youngest children. Our guest today, Malina Malkani, is a best-selling author, registered dietitian, and infant feeding expert. She has a new book coming out this November titled Safe and Simple Food Allergy Prevention. This guide not only explores the importance of early introduction of allergenic foods, but provides families with a roadmap to ensure their children can avoid food allergies from the start. It's so interesting because most of us grew up hearing the opposite, that delaying certain foods was the best way to avoid allergies. But as she's pointing out in her book, research like the 2015 LEAP study found that introducing peanuts between 4 and 6 months of age could actually reduce the risk of peanut allergy by 86%. Can't wait to get her thoughts on this. That's a huge finding. Welcoming now to the show is the amazing Malina Malkani. Welcome, superstar.
Thank you so much, Zen. It's so good to be back. I always love chatting with you.
It's so fun to have you because you're filled with knowledge, and moms, we love information. Information is power, right? So your new book emphasizes early introduction of allergenic foods like peanuts and eggs. Can you tell us why this approach is so crucial for preventing food allergies, especially during infancy?
So, offering foods like peanut and egg in baby safe forms, and that's really key early, often, and consistently, starting at around 6 months of age, helps reduce the risk of food allergies. There's about 9 top allergens. We don't know as much about the rest of those allergens. We know the most about peanut and egg. So, those are the most crucial to start with. But I do want to just say, clarify one thing, which is unfortunately, as much as I wish that it were, it's not a guarantee that we can eradicate food allergies. We can reduce the risk, and you mentioned that unbelievable stat of 86% that offering peanut foods early and often can help reduce the risk of. We know a little bit less about the rest of the allergens, but peanut, there was an amazing study that came out in conjunction with the LEAP study about 12 years later. And this just came out in May. So it was super interesting. The researchers of the LEAP study followed those children, about 500 of them, who were in the original LEAP study, and took a look to see, did that early introduction of peanut hold? Did the peanut prevention of the allergy stay for the next 12 years? And there was a 71% reduction in the risk of peanut allergy, even 12 years later. So what we learned from that is early introduction works.
It's key. It's key. Now, it's crazy to think that with all of these advancements in medicine, outdated information still circulates so widely. I mean, I read that that nearly 60% of parents in a recent study weren't following the latest food allergy prevention guidelines. Now, this lack of awareness is something we really need to change, because if this is where misinformation happens. Now, what misconceptions do you think most parents have about infant feeding and food allergy preventions, and why are so many families still just unaware of the updated guidelines?
Yeah, you've made such a wonderful point at the beginning of the interview about how the guidelines used to be completely different from what they are now. The guidelines, in thanks to the LEAP study that you mentioned and to other research that's emerged since then, have done a complete 180 in the recommendations. So that leads to a lot of the myths and misconceptions about food allergy prevention, because when I have 3 girls, they're 11, 13, and 15. When I had my first baby, the recommendation was to delay the introduction of allergens by 1, 2, and even until about 3 years of age, depending on the allergen and the risk, the baby's risk of developing food allergies. So now, when we have families now that are being told, oh, we need to start offering these allergenic foods at around 6 months, sometimes a little bit even earlier, it can be really jarring because it's not what historically they've heard. And
Right.
that recommendation was unfortunately based on more of a hunch than on any sort of data or
Right.
research. research. And it's not pediatricians' faults. We didn't have the research. We didn't have the information that we have now. Thankfully, we do. That's what I'm hoping this book is going to be, is not only a one-stop resource for families to make this process really practical and easy, but also for healthcare providers.
Right.
They,
Now, I want to pivot a little bit because I want to be mindful of the time. We have a lot of questions, but I find that it's really heartbreaking when you consider that low income families not only struggle with access to nutrient dense foods, but they may also bear a higher burden when managing food allergies, right? It really highlights the importance of making prevention strategies widely accessible, which I don't think they are right now. Now, you mentioned that food allergies disproportionately affect families with fewer resources. Can you expand on that and on how your new book aims to address this issue?
yeah, there's likely lots of reasons why this is the case, and there is data that looks at this and actually proves it. Um, it's likely that there's less consistent and timely education, that there's less access to healthcare, that there's less access to the allergenic foods in baby safe forms that they need in order to be able to introduce these foods. We don't exactly know why food allergies develop. It's probably multifactorial. So there's probably lots of other drivers contributing to these disparities as well, unfortunately. But what I'm hoping that this book will be is, because there's resources available on baby led weaning over here, there's resources on starting solids over here, there's food allergy prevention over here, but there's not something that's affordable and all in one place that makes this process practical for families. So I'm hoping that this resource will make that it'll be an affordable resource that can make this process practical for everybody and make it something that everybody can implement early on.
Melina, you're so passionate about
Oh,
this topic that it really does radiate through the airwaves. And I'm going to go back now a little bit, but I can imagine that for new parents, right, the idea of introducing foods like peanuts to their infants could be terrifying, but as your research suggests, it's actually one of the most effective ways to protect children from developing these life-threatening allergies later on. Now, your book combines baby-led feeding with food allergy prevention. So let's talk about advice. What advice would you give to parents who are nervous about trying baby led feeding, especially when it comes to allergenic foods?
such a great question, because that, in my experience, is one of the biggest barriers to introducing allergenic foods, is the fear associated with it. So a few things. First of all, only about 3% of babies are going to develop a food allergy during their first year of life. So if you flip that, 97% will not react. So the odds are really good when you're starting to introduce these foods. Second of all, the likelihood of a severe reaction is so extremely low. What we learned from the LEAP study is that for the babies that are already sensitized and who are going to develop an allergic reaction, it's going to be really mild. It's very much more, yes, anaphylaxis can happen during infancy, but it's so uncommon. And it's much safer for you to discover if your baby has a food allergy during infancy, when the immune system is much more malleable and the reactions are so much more likely to be mild, than waiting until toddlerhood or even later, when the likelihood of a severe reaction is much more likely. So that's really important. Also, there have been no recorded deaths on first introduction.
I feel like a lot of parents are listening to this and going, okay, this makes sense. Introduce it earlier on to mitigate the risk later. Now, I want to, we have 3 minutes left, but I have a couple of more questions here. So, getting kids to eat healthy is already a challenge for so many parents. But when you add the concern of food allergies, it becomes even more complicated. So, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on how you navigate this in the book. How does your book tackle the challenge of making nutrient dense foods accessible and appealing to children, especially those at risk of allergies?
Absolutely. That was one of the biggest challenges of the book, was to take all of these foods and put them into baby safe forms that were actually delicious, because it's not going to help us if we're introducing these allergens and they're not actually eating the foods. The other piece is families, because as a mom, when you're developing more than one meal at a time, it's a really quick recipe for burnout. So I created 80 recipes and 8 meal plans that help keep those allergens in the diet frequently, which is another piece of the food allergy prevention puzzle that's important, is to keep offering those allergens once they've been introduced. And each of the recipes can be offered to the entire family. So you can draw baby into the family meal and help encourage baby to try these foods by role modeling, which is such a key piece to feeding kids and making nutrient-dense foods delicious and something that they're likely to eat.
Now, let's pivot a little bit to hydration because we have about 2 minutes left. So, hydration plays such a vital role in overall health, especially for growing children. Ensuring that kids stay hydrated is not just about avoiding thirst, it's key to their cognitive function and mood and even digestive health. So, coconut water is rich in electrolytes like potassium and magnesium and can be a great option to keep kids hydrated in a natural way. Malina, how important is proper hydration and electrolyte balance for young children, especially when introducing solids? Could coconut water be a healthy option for maintaining hydration and electrolyte levels?
For children, yes. For infants, we do want to protect their intake of breast milk and or formula. So even water is, maybe in tiny little amounts, but really we don't want to be offering water to babies. But as they move into toddlerhood and childhood, hydration and keeping a proper electrolyte balance is crucial. So yes, absolutely. And one of the things as a mom of three, I think it's so funny how these water bottle trends go in and out. That's one really great way if you're hoping to keep your child hydrated is to get them a water bottle that they really love and stick with it.
I know those Stanleys ain't cheap, but they do keep them hydrated. Now, what are some tips for parents to ensure their children are drinking enough water throughout the day outside of just getting them a fancy can? And how can coconut water serve as a nutrient rich hydrating alternative to other beverages?
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly if you have a kid who's really active and who's sweating and who's out in the field and is playing a lot of sports or dancing or doing gymnastics, it can be really important to replenish those electrolytes because electrolytes, they help move nutrients in and out of the cells. They help move waste out of the cells. They help balance the amount of water that's in your body. And so if you're sweating a lot and losing those electrolytes, it's important to replace them. And I love coconut water that doesn't have added sugar because it's not adding to that added sugar load in a child's diet, which is something that's a huge challenge since added sugars are in so many things that kids like to eat and drink. And so it's a great way to keep them hydrated, especially when they're super active, but also not be contributing to those extra grams of added sugar, which we don't want to do. So yeah, just reminding them to be drinking not just after exercise and activity, but before, during, and after, because all three are super important for keeping the child hydrated and making it a habit. Sometimes for some kids who aren't so likely to drink, you could take a little rubber band and stick it on the water bottle and say, okay, I understand this looks a little overwhelming to drink the whole thing, but can you drink to the band? And it'll be a little bit of a game for them. So it's nice to just keep reminding and keep it accessible.
That's a great tip. I'm going to use that one. Drink to the band.
Yeah.
Well, we are officially out of time, my dear. Thank you so much for coming on. It was such a pleasure having you. You're so full of information. And like I said, knowledge is power.
Definitely. Thank you for having me.
Be sure to look out for her book, Safe and Simple Food Allergy Prevention. It's coming out this November. Whether you're a parent or simply someone interested in health and wellness, this guide is a must read for preventing food allergies right from the start. And you can follow Malina Malkani for more tips and updates on infant feeding and nutrition. You could head directly to her website at malinamalkani.com or foodallergypreventionbook.com. And do check her out on the gram at healthy.mom.healthy.kids. That was our Hydration with Heart segment brought to you by Once Upon a Coconut. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. We'll be right back after this.
A Moment of Zen is brought to you by Once Upon a Coconut.
Discover the refreshing taste of 100% pure coconut water that actually tastes great. Naturally sweet with no artificial flavors or added sugar. It's packed with electrolytes to keep you hydrated throughout your day. And with 10% of profits going to charity, every sip makes a difference. Pure taste, pure goodness. Experience nature's Gatorade. Visit Once Upon a Coconut or naturesgatorade.com.